urgent. Partisans have leaked Russia's plan to defend Crimea. The occupiers have switched to standby mode. The tension surrounding the summer offensive is decreasing. Nothing has gone the way Putin wanted. The occupiers are still holding on to Pokrovsk. There's a new phase of fighting there. The Ukrainian armed forces are making an impact. All of Europe envies these technologies. NATO is panicking. Urgent border protection. All this in our episode of Hellpoint. It has begun in Crimea. You need to hear this. Partisans have leaked exclusive information. The occupiers are fleeing and starting a game of hide and seek. They are urgently moving equipment and are afraid of strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces. What a mess this is. The video has already gone viral online. What is happening on the peninsula right now? We'll tell you in just a moment.
This is the Jankoy-Feodosia highway. ATEH partisans are tracking the movement of Russian engineering and military equipment. The occupiers in Crimea are spreading fake information. They claim that this equipment is heading to the Kherson region to cross the Dnipro. This is how the enemy tries to mislead the defense forces. But in reality, they were moving the convoy to hide it from our intelligence.
They are using up a lot of the resources, primarily fuel and lubricants, as well as human resources. They are forced to travel quite long distances in order to try to convince us that a particular convoy is heading, for example, to the temporarily occupied part of the Kherson region.
And this is their usual tactic. The occupiers are constantly moving their reserves. They are moving air defense systems closer to the mainland part of Ukraine to shield their troops from our attacks.
They are afraid of our strike on Crimea and most likely are checking the readiness of their troops on the ground to respond to such challenges. This is about checking their reserves, which they can deploy or transfer to support Russian troops in those directions where they are already conducting offensive actions.
But the Russians cannot secure themselves in Crimea because our military has intensified missile and drone attacks on the temporarily occupied peninsula.
The enemy knows that this strike by the Ukrainian defense forces can be delivered at any time, day or night, morning or afternoon. In other words, at any time of day. We are talking about those locations from which the enemy launches Shaheds, Girans, Gerberas, that is those kamikaze attack drones that also strike peaceful settlements. Obviously, they have to maneuver. Obviously, they have to secure themselves.
After Ukrainian strikes on enemy military facilities, the occupiers are trying to strengthen security measures, and they are doing this in the Soviet tradition through inspections. Partisans have recorded this in one of the districts of Sevastopol.
This military unit is part of the 31st Air Defense Division of the Air and Space Forces of the Russian Federation. The unit is equipped with S-400 surface-to-air missile systems. Currently, there is a tense atmosphere in the unit due to the recent successful strikes by Ukrainian UAVs. Inspections have become more frequent there. The partisan movements of ATESH.
All information about the movement of military equipment, the security of the unit, and personnel is collected by partisans and promptly relayed to the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Elvina Saidbulaeva, we are Ukraine United News Marathon.
Russia's summer offensive is dying right now. Things did not go as Putin had planned. Russian generals can't even lift their eyes. They're so ashamed. The Ukrainian armed forces managed to counterattack, sneaking up and striking the enemy hard. The occupiers are angry and are pressing on Pokrovsk, rushing straight into the fire of our defenders. Does this bring any results? And what is the situation on other hot sections of the front? You will find out right now in the following report.
The Russian offensive ran out of steam just a few weeks after it began. This is reported by The Telegraph. Analysts from the publication have calculated that the pace of the Russians' advance has dropped significantly since the beginning of the month. And on some sections of the front, it is now zero. And yes, experts claim that the number of attacks on Ukrainian positions has not decreased, but over the past couple of weeks there have also been no successes. After passing through the gray zones, Russian units have run into well-fortified defensive lines of the Ukrainian armed forces, and they are unable to advance any further.
Overall, we are seeing certain signs of stabilization, meaning that the enemy is unable to accomplish even tactical objectives on many sections of the front, although the situation remains difficult.
The situation remains most difficult as usual in the Donetsk direction, especially between Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka. The Kremlin is no longer hiding the direction of its main attack, having concentrated here the maximum effort and virtually all of its available reserves.
They are clearly focused on their objective, repeating it dozens of times, to capture the Donetsk region, and the breakthrough directions are of course Pokrovsky, Novopavlivsky, Toretsky, as well as over the past day, increased activity there and Chasiv Yar. These are several strategic points where they have concentrated all 110,000 of their manpower, as well as a large number of strike assets, including drones and missile systems. They are constantly launching KABs, and they've also brought in anti-aircraft missile systems.
The Institute for the Study of War believes that this summer Russia will not be able to come up with anything new and will essentially continue the offensive it began in the spring. However, experts note that in addition to all the existing directions, Russia also wants to add the Zaporizhia direction.
Our command sees this. We are preparing counterattacks specifically in the direction of Zaporizhia, Tokmak and Storobotyn. They are trying and will continue to try to attack, but we are ready on our side. We are already openly talking about this. That is, the enemy is no longer hiding anything, so we are deploying all means for counterattacks at longer distances and then directly on the front line.
Our military manages to hold the situation on the Sumy direction. Having completely stopped the Russian offensive here, the Ukrainian armed forces even managed to launch short counterattacks themselves. At the same time, the situation was stabilized also thanks to holding part of the bridgehead in the Kursk region.
The enemy's best, so to speak, assets are the airborne troops, air assault and parachute regiments, and accordingly high-level firepower. That's why this front has stalled, and the enemy cannot continue to advance their offensive operations and is suffering new losses. Now, Putin is asking for new contingents from North Korea, up to 10,000 more to be sent there. But so far, Kim Jong-il hasn't decided because he sees that many are dying.
Another direction where Russia is wiping out its assault groups by the dozens every day remains the Kupiansk sector. However, soldiers on the ground report that here too the enemy is making no progress. Even though they actually have an advantage in both manpower and weaponry, the lack of experience among the newly mobilized assault groups allows this pressure to be held back.
The enemy has such a colossal superiority, and in some breakthrough areas the force ratio can reach 1:7 or even 1:10, and this is no secret either. Nevertheless, they are not achieving the kind of success that such a colossal superiority in forces and resources should have guaranteed them.
At the same time, apparently when calculating their losses, Russia seems to have decided not to rely on technology anymore and plans to fight using only manpower. The armed forces of Ukraine note that in 80% of assaults along the entire front line, soldiers have stopped being provided with motorcycles and vehicles. And obviously there is nowhere left to go anyway. Those kinds of offensives, like at the beginning of spring when the occupiers would rush across entire fields on ATVs and buggies, are long gone and should be forgotten. On a global scale, the situation has been stabilized.
Overall, if you're talking about it, yes, there is some advancement in certain sectors by a few hundred meters, but we are keeping the situation under control. And accordingly, the enemy does not have the prospects that Putin claims that he has offensive potential and will use this as leverage against negotiators in Istanbul.
At the same time, the recent words of Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi come to mind that Ukraine will not spend the whole summer in a passive defense. So, most likely, after the front is fully stabilized, it will be the Ukrainian armed forces who will be expected to advance.
Swarms of drones are flying in and terrorizing Ukrainians. The defense forces have put a definitive end to the issue of air defense. The Strela is now powerfully taking down Russian Shahids. In a fit of rage, it sweeps them away one by one and sends them to the graveyard of the Russian military-industrial complex. This drone interceptor is doing the incredible. No one else has such a weapon yet. How does Ukraine plan to further improve its air defense and finally pin down the Russians? We'll talk about this in just a moment.
Long-range Russian drones are attacking Ukrainian cities in swarms.
We were hit by shrapnel One person got a serious head injury. The woman was badly hurt in the back and legs. Nothing survived in the house.
The Shaheds have become much faster, smarter, and more dangerous.
This is an explosive charge, comrade. The one that's in the current Shahed. And it weighs 70 kilograms.
How do we stop the weapon that is destroying us from the sky? Thousands of long-range strike drones have been attacking Ukraine in recent months. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, our air defense is shooting down just over 80% of the kamikaze drones. However, this figure used to be higher.
In fact, it is still quite a high percentage. There you have it. But nevertheless, of course, it's lower than the rates we had, for example, in 2023-2024, when the destruction rate reached 90% or even higher. Nevertheless, we understand that in principle the potential for growth remains significant.
To destroy strike UAVs, Ukrainian defenders are actively using army aviation, helicopters, and in particular F-16 aircraft.
There was great view through the binoculars.
However, the Shaheds currently flying in the Ukrainian sky have become more powerful. They reach speeds of up to 300 kilometers per hour, carry 90 kilograms of explosives, are equipped with jet engines and artificial intelligence, and can ascend to altitudes of over 2,000 meters. This creates significant problems for mobile fire teams. After all, hitting a drone with machine gun fire as it plummets down like a stone is almost impossible.
It approaches the target. If there is a mobile fire team near the target, it goes into a dive. And so if on this stretch they can do something, if the mobile fire team can do anything, then on this stretch they try to shoot it down. When they train to shoot at Shaheds, these simulators, trainers, you have to lead the target, you have to calculate how many body lengths ahead you need to aim, and so on from different angles. But they weren't trained for this kind of thing.
Besides training, effective means of destruction are also needed, and it seems that they exist. A new type of fighter has appeared in the skies over Ukraine.
Enemy unmanned targets. We're talking about interceptor drones, which have already destroyed hundreds of Russian reconnaissance drones like the Orlan, Zala, and Lancet. And recently, this new Ukrainian weapon has also started hunting Shaheds.
In fact, talk about this type of drone has been going on since last year. There have already been confirmed cases of successful use of such countermeasures against enemy subsonic targets, such as medium and long-range kamikaze drones. These include Shaheds, Gerans, Gerberas, Parodias, and others. At least 4 companies are supplying such solutions to the security and defense forces.
And Ukrainian companies are currently ramping up production of interceptors for Russian Shaheds. This is the Strela drone, capable of reaching speeds of over 300 kilometers per hour and staying airborne for about 20 minutes. Thanks to its unique camera, this interceptor can operate both during the day and at night.
In fact, this drone is essentially an anti-aircraft system. Yes, it is shaped like a missile. This is already an almost ready-to-use prototype. We have units that are directly testing these drones in specific locations where there are concentrations or routes of movement of the Shaheds.
In addition, this Strela is capable of taking off from special mobile platforms, which allows for a quick response to enemy targets. Aviation experts say that interceptor drones can be launched from aerostats.
They can be launched from aerostats, but I think that on aerostats and tethered aerostats should be radars. If it has drones that launch from onboard and intercept the Shahed, it will be a short distance and you can reach high speeds there.
Experts emphasize Russian Shaheds should be shot down by drones. Such weapons are much cheaper compared to missiles for Western air defense systems.
They used to say that intercepted drones are ineffective. So we have to shoot them down over the SAMS, IRIS-T, and anti-aircraft missile systems. I ask, do you not understand how much a single missile costs? Even the simplest version, like the AM-9, costs no less than 100,000 yearly, 150, 200, 250,000.
If we talk about the overall role and effectiveness of drones, considering that their cost is generally 10 times or more lower than that of a drone like the Shahd, which according to various estimates, currently costs between $120,000 and $150,000, including the price of the warhead.
To increase the number of interceptor drones, a significant amount of money is needed. Pilots need to be trained, and Ukraine is looking for ways to implement this plan. At the NATO summit, President Zelensky met with the leaders of Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Italy, Poland, and the Secretary General of the Alliance. In particular, they discussed air defense systems and interceptors for Iranian Shaheds, and perhaps the President managed to convince the partners of the need to protect Ukrainian skies. Mikhailo Maneliuk, Valentin Bielic, Podrobici Inter-Television Channel, United News' Marathon.
A new threat in Pokrovsky. The Russians are resorting to extremes. Brutal. The hellish assaults are different now. Right at this moment, firefights have begun. The occupiers are baring their teeth in trying to cut off logistics. Our guys are holding their ground and giving the enemy a powerful slap every time they try to stir up trouble again. How they manage to hold their positions despite everything and keep Putin's troops away from the Dnipropetrovsk region, we'll tell you more in the following report.
Yes, indeed. Are you satisfied? Yes, my friend. Well. You made it, kid. Go ahead, kid. Fire.
For how long a period of time have you been actively serving as a dedicated mortar operator?
2 years.
And you've never encountered small arms combat before?
Never combat.
And this is your first time?
Yes.
The gunner's assistant, call sign Blondie, has just returned from treatment. He suffered a concussion and lost several comrades. The Russians hit their position with tube artillery. In addition to that, and various types of attack drones here on the Pokrovsk front, the mortar crews have encountered a new threat for the first time.
We often have to engage in small arms firefights because the enemy rides up on mopeds. They drive right up to the mortar positions. Yes, they circle around, move through very quickly. You can see them across fields and all sorts of open areas, and then they come right up to us. They open fire, yes, and dismount from their vehicles. They can just stop by and hide somewhere in the village, and then, well, after dinner, walk around the positions at night.
Shot.
You heard from the sound that...
No, they gave it to us from this headquarters.
And how many of them are there on this?
Well, only one of them reached us.
What was he with?
Just an assault rifle. 4 magazines, body armor, that's it. A motorcycle, nothing else.
So a motorcycle with a Russian on it with an assault rifle drives up to you, and what, he starts shooting at you?
They just hide, run into the greenery, then simply hide our positions. Shot.
And how incredibly frequent are these significant scientific and technological breakthroughs?
Well, for the month I've been here, I've been, well, a little more, right? I've been on this route twice.
And is it always in small groups like that?
2 to 4 people.
A large number of guided aerial bombs, artillery, mortars, and sometimes even tanks. In the Pokrovsk direction, for several months in a row now, there have been the highest number of Russian attacks per day. But the most insidious threat is drones. The Russians are trying to cut off logistics, the delivery of ammunition, and basically prevent anyone from reaching the positions.
The scariest thing probably is getting in and out of the position, because on the approaches, there are FPV drones called waiters waiting for you. And that's probably the most problematic part.
You can help protect those who defend us and hold the approaches to Dnipropetrovsk in the Pokrovsk direction by scanning the QR code. This is a fundraiser for electronic warfare equipment to fight against Russian drones. Maria Malevska, Alexander Brinza, Ior Serebrian, Vikna, STB United News.
This saves the lives of our people on the front line. A technological marvel. Ukrainian defenders have built something on the front lines that has made the Russians nervous. Enemy drones are now falling right into a trap. The drone terror has collapsed. Our defense is reaching a new level. More details about how anti-drone tunnels, already called tunnels of life, are being built in the following report.
Here in the Sumy region, enemy drones fly around the clock. Every trip out could be the last. That's why a new engineering line of defense is appearing right here.
Just now, 2 glide bombs landed nearby. And there are lots of drones right now, a whole lot.
This is an anti-drone tunnel. It is being built by soldiers of the 47th Separate Engineering Brigade. In a week, they construct dozens of meters of shelter. The material is meshed with UV-resistant additives. It's lightweight, but it can withstand hits from FPV drones.
In 7 days, we shot down during attacks on personnel 7 drones, and in this case we've already had instances where a drone attacked the vehicle, hit it, and thanks to the mesh, let's say, it softened the impact, and neither the vehicle nor the personnel were harmed.
It's a lifeline.
Let's do it.
The mesh is rigid. It's almost impossible to tear it by hand. The tunnel is long enough for a vehicle to pass through or for soldiers to take cover.
They are divided into 2 types. That is where tactical level roads are blocked. This will be roughly the option, approximately. And 5 meters in height above the road level, above ground level. There's also a type 2. This one is for operational tactical level roads. That's where there might still be mine rollers, and a tracked vehicle with a welded grille can also be transported on the roller. And there we set the height to 6 meters.
The enemy already knows about our tunnels, so they start shelling the areas immediately after them. But this does not stop the engineers.
We are military, we have a mission, so based on what we've been assigned, we try to, well, kind of ask, allow us. We want to try it this way, it will be faster, it will be more interesting. So what's the conclusion? If it gives even a 1% chance that the mission will be accomplished, the entire personnel will be involved, of course it needs to be done.
Anti-drone tunnels are not armor and not a wall, but they are additional protection, and every meter of the entire structure can save a life. Yuri Lozenko, Vitaly Bakumenko, Army Television for MI Ukraine, Marathon, United News.
Europe is shifting to a war footing. The borders are already mined. NATO is seriously preparing to repel Russia. The Kremlin has gone all out. Their appetites are staggering. They will go further. Right now, Ukraine is holding back the Russians' efforts. The alliance is trying to come together and make emergency decisions. Whether this will help stop Putin, we'll tell you in a moment.
A new Iron Curtain is descending over Europe. If during the height of the Cold War between NATO and the USSR it was the Soviet Union that actively built such a barrier on its border, then in 2025 it is the member countries of the North Atlantic Alliance themselves who are forced to take on this task. All NATO countries that border Russia or Belarus have come to the same conclusion. To deter a possible offensive, they need measures that until recently were considered unacceptable. As a result, several NATO countries have announced their intention to withdraw from the Ottawa Convention, the treaty banning the production, storage and use of anti-personnel mines. Finland, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia have concluded that in order to deter a possible offensive, steps are needed that until recently were considered unacceptable. Russia is not a party to the convention and continues to use mines aggressively, putting us at a strategic disadvantage. In such a situation, our armed forces need the freedom to use all possible means to protect people and NATO's eastern flank. It is expected that by the end of this month, Finland, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia will officially notify the UN of their withdrawal from the treaty, after which they will begin actively producing, stockpiling and deploying anti-personnel mines in their territories. The Finns will be the first to take action, as their border with Russia is the longest among the allied countries.
And the Finns are withdrawing from the convention that bans anti-personnel mines. They're going to mine everything there. Well, apparently, based on the Ukrainian experience, where indeed such dense mining was able to stop those small groups of meat assaults, yes, mines work perfectly. Apparently, Finland will now do the same along its entire border with the Russian Federation.
Meanwhile, in Latvia, which also withdrew from the Ottawa Convention, they are in no hurry to mine their own borders. The authorities are confident that, if necessary, they will do it in the shortest possible time, but for now they are installing anti-tank hedgehogs along the border, digging a ditch and scattering so-called dragon's teeth throughout the border zone.
Right now, we are not planning to deploy mines. This concerns the existing anti-tank and anti-personnel mines. Of course, we need these mines. They are stored in our warehouses. If we are faced with an approaching crisis and a real military threat, additional measures will be taken at the border, including the deployment of mines. Vladislav Milovanov, In peacetime, mines will not be deployed.
Narrator, but the situation can change at any moment, acknowledge the member countries of the North Atlantic Alliance. While the Lithuanians, for example, are confident that they are still living in peacetime, their neighbors, the Latvians, on the contrary, believe that the war against Russia has already begun.
Katerina Hutsakalo. If you look at the map of all hybrid attacks, from cyber attacks and border provocations to ongoing information campaigns, it becomes clear that the level of hostility from Russia toward Lithuania and the region is unprecedented. Russia may be ready to invade NATO territory within 3 to 5 years, approximately between 2028 and 2030.
Narrator, however, these dates are very tentative. The Kremlin has long since stopped relying on either logic or common sense in its decisions. Russian troops near the border are refurbishing their military bases and moving more and more military equipment to the NATO borders. And this is despite the fact that on the front in Ukraine, they are critically short of those very same tanks.
Andriy Tsaplienko, if a Russian soldier's foot has ever set foot somewhere, then Russia claims to have some rights to that territory. He's just being blatantly open about it now. Yes, he's no longer embarrassed. He doesn't even talk about any, well, he's called a legalist, right? About any kind of legal grounds. Well, it just, everyone knows that it's ours. By the code, it's ours. Well, by the code, it's ours. The Russian Empire was there, so it's ours. That's it.
Narrator, and it seems that only Ukraine can stop Putin in his ongoing territorial claims. Experts and analysts agree, if official Kyiv does not hold out, Finland, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia will be next. That is why, while strengthening their own borders, the Baltic countries are actively supplying weapons and ammunition to the Ukrainian armed forces, who are now, in fact, defending not only their own land from the occupiers, but also NATO countries.
Andriy Tsaplienko, everything is being decided right now in Ukraine. If the conflict is frozen on terms favorable to the Kremlin, it will be a clear signal to Putin that such barbarism can continue. And then the question arises as to where he might continue this kind of aggression. So the first thing that comes to mind is the Baltic countries. And plus, from time to time, there are talks about Kazakhstan as well.
Darina Hutsakalo, that's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo. Even more scorching news from the front in our next episode. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.